This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on PM-SHRI Yojana and new education policy. The participants are Dr. J.S. Rajput, former Director NCERT, and Sonu Sood, AIR correspondent.
Yesterday, on the occasion of Teachers' Day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the PM-SHRI Pradhan Mantri Schools for Rising India scheme, wherein 14,500 schools across India will be selected and upgraded to be future ready. The PM said these 14,500 PM-SHRI schools will become model schools, which will encapsulate the full spirit of National Education Policy 2020. Mr. Rajput, can you tell us about the significance of the new PM-SHRI initiative for the education ecosystem of our country?
See, we have been talking about a couple of things in the realm of education for several years. For example, child's interest, learning environment, multidisciplinarity, holistic inquiry-based approach. Now, the National Education Policy 2020 has taken note of all the expectations, and it's a very perfect articulation of national aspirations and the conditions under which our young persons will be working for the next 20 years. And therefore, the major requirement is that every teacher really understand the import of all the recommendations in the new education policy and how they are translated. So in that context, I view the opening of these PM-SHRI schools. They will be fully equipped to implement every aspect of the National Education Policy 2020. And once teachers visit them, these will become leadership schools. And that, I think, could be the spirit behind opening of these schools. I may also mention one thing. When the secondary Vidyalayas were opened, people said this will create a lot of differences. So many lot of criticism was there. Similarly, when the Navodaya Vidyalayas were opened, people said, why only few hundred, why only around 1,000 or so? My point is, yes, you cannot suddenly bring every school to the level of secondary Vidyalaya Sangathan or the Navodaya Vidyalaya. But you can certainly create places where people can be inspired, prepared, and when they go back, they bring about the changes in their own schools. This is, to my mind, the spirit because of which this is being started. We shall be very careful in selecting these schools, number one. We shall be very careful in ensuring that the initial enthusiasm persists and it actually enhances it with time. I can cite certain initiatives on model schools, new schools, exemplary schools which are attempted in several states. Not all of them could sustain the initial enthusiasm.
So the PM-SHRI schools will be from among schools managed by central government, state governments, UT governments and local bodies. What is the likely criteria for selection of these schools? You feel they will be uniformly distributed across the geography of our country?
I would not like to speculate. Let them just think about it. And naturally, when they think about it, they will be consulting people if they have not already consulted the state governments. Because you see, the process in the formulation of the policy was that everybody was consulted. It was a rare level of magnitude of consultation which really occurred in the formulation of the policy. And I am familiar and I am aware that whatever is being done by the Ministry for Implementation is being arrived at the finality in very serious consultation, in-depth consultation with the states. And therefore, the criteria would certainly take into account where do we need to improve schools more, where do we are more deficient in our school system, and therefore places where they are far off, which are normally called remote and far-flung areas, hilly areas, the mobility is limited. That type of things will be into consideration. So you cannot say that we shall distribute on the population basis or this. I would suggest that we shall have to consider how much leadership these schools can provide to improve more and more schools. This could be one criteria. And for example, I would say the states will really need to improve the schools. I could name one or two, but could avoid also because they would not like it. But certain states are really very, very negligent about their schools. The states, and based upon my experience at those 5 years, 1989 to 94, I would say the success of this scheme will depend upon the central government. It will provide the resources, fine. But the larger success will depend upon how state governments respond, how they derive inspiration for their teachers in those schools which need to be upgraded by them. If Prime Minister has said that the central government will upgrade 14,500 schools, let states also come up that, well, we will also come up with say 500, 200, 100 or 1,000 schools. But there should be a genuine upgradation, not a political upgradation. Some people who talk of any numbers, they will say all schools. And I can assure you, it is not possible to improve all schools in one go. It will take time, it has to take time, but there are certain basics which can certainly be done. For example, the policy says that the system of part-time teachers, Shiksha Karmis, Gurujis, on a small amount, a small honorarium, this system must go. The policy says it will be abolished. This can be abolished even before the stipulated date if the state governments really take education seriously. Several state governments do not take education seriously, do not give it a priority. Particularly, they do not give priority to the primary schools, secondary schools, which are run by the government. This is a drawback and this must be corrected. So my expectation would be that this announcement by the central government should be accepted by all the state governments, UT governments, and the response should be that we shall also come up. That I think will be right in the right aspect.
So the Prime Minister said these schools will have modern infrastructure, they will have transformational and holistic method of imparting education. There will be emphasis on discovery-oriented, experiential, learning-centric way of teaching. So you feel that the role of the teaching community in bringing about these changes in pedagogy will be very, very important, and openness to adopt change, a progressive mindset among teachers is crucial for this movement?
More than teachers, I would like to mention the success will depend on the teacher educators, those who prepare teachers and train teachers. That I think is the most important part. Definitely, teachers will make all the difference. This difference has always been dependent upon the teacher. Teacher is the kingpin. Teacher educator is more important in my assessment. And this I would like to say that yes, teachers have to be prepared. Teachers have to be assured that they will get the respect, they will get the honor, they will get all the opportunities for professional development and growth. Because in absence of that, you cannot be successful in a venture of this type. This venture can become a hallmark in the implementation of reforms in Indian education system. Let us be very clear that teacher recruitment should be the priority of all state governments. They should immediately, and this is being mentioned many times, but it's very unfortunate that teacher recruitment is not getting the priority in the country that it gets. My perceptions are very clear. Most of those, right from top to bottom, who are responsible for school reforms, education reforms, policy implementation, have their children in private schools, and therefore government schools get neglected. It is the leadership at the state level. We should come forward and take up a very, very huge project on improving the government schools run by municipal bodies, by the state government. Once this is taken up, I can assure this rush for private schools and the sufferings that are being inflicted by the people who are from lower middle class or middle class are immense. I also mention very often, because I have experienced it, that in 1950, 1960, the credibility of the government schools was at its peak. Today it is not. And this is to be studied by all of us why it is not. My point is, let this scheme become the ignition point for restoring the credibility of the government schools, for the public schools funded by the public. And once that credibility is established, the gap between private schools and the government schools, the gap between the haves and have-nots, and this unfortunate rush for private schools, all these things will get sorted out, and India will indeed be in a position to provide what Constitution has already assured, equal opportunity for all children. These schools will be different. They are PM-SHRI schools. They will be equipped by the central government. But I see a ray of hope in this establishment in terms of reducing the gap that is happening. But that can happen provided state governments come up very firmly with dedication and devotion for their people, for their young children, because children that they will get good education wherever they are, in whichever school they are.
So, do you feel that benefiting from the practical experience of the PM-SHRI schools in identifying and meeting the various challenges in becoming model schools, lakhs of schools from across the country will be able to adopt NEP 2020 and adapt themselves much more smoothly and efficiently?
Think of the central schools and Navodaya schools. They have become model for so many others. They have established a credibility. The numbers are limited. It's difficult to get admissions, but there is a model. And if you see the products of these schools, they have established a name for themselves in various ways. So there is an example before us that if we are able to provide the right type of education in right type of environment and with correct pedagogy, that is very important. I often remember Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, who said, let the children learn in a natural environment. He wanted the schools to be away from all the congestions of population. They think that a quiet, natural place. It may not be possible, but attempt can be made to go as much near as possible towards nature. And I'm very happy to know that mention has been made that green schools, these schools will also be green schools. I'm sure this will be a very successful project. And while there may be only 14,500, but I'm sure at least every school of this will be able to impress upon 10, 20, 30, 40, even 100 schools around the area. But that will require full slot of teachers being available in those schools which we expect to be improved upon this. Basic minimum facilities being provided to them. And state governments coming up with all the determination to help them. This is a basic requirement. And before, if they don't help, if they continue with a poor teacher-taught ratio, if they do not appoint regular teachers, how can you expect a 25-year young person drawing a very small amount, not knowing what will happen to him after at the end of the next session? Uncertainty doesn't allow him to devote fully to his task, and therefore in our system he requires the regularity of the job, assurance that I will be working, that one can devote. And these young persons are being wasted by our system by calling them Shiksha Karmi and others. That can be discussed in detail elsewhere. But my point is, these PM-SHRI schools will succeed in transforming other schools. That is more important. That is their job. Performing well and getting good results is a very minor task of these schools. The major task is to become influencers on schools and school systems, to bring out practices which the state can adopt as a whole. That type of situation could develop in next 2-3 years once this scheme takes shape and comes in the right perspective.
So if we talk about the entire approach and assessment of the students at all levels will be based on conceptual understanding and application of knowledge in real life situations and will be competency based. So you feel that this is a future-ready approach to ensure the students get more skilled and employable as they attain education?
You see, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore referred to and said that every child when he is born, two divine boons I can say are from the nature, as you may like to say, uniformly given to every child. Power of ideas, power of imagination. Now, our education system, he has said, impedes these persistently. These schools will inspire these. This is what policy expects. Power of ideas and power of imagination. These schools will find out what is the interest of the child. If he is interested in music, the school will encourage him and help him move ahead in music and not prepare for the engineering or MBA. The child's interest must be studied, must be nurtured. He should be inspired in that area because talent is what you need in the new setup, in the global movement towards the knowledge society. From 80 years ago, it was said that future empires shall be empires of knowledge. We are all seeing that, the empires of knowledge. We have also seen we are capable. Our young persons who have studied in Indian schools are now making a name in the world, whether it is Silicon Valley or NASA or any such organization or all those multinationals and corporates. If they can do it, and if I can improve my schools, say, suppose we have 30% good schools and make it 60%, my cognitive capital will be multiplied manifold. And this is why these schools would be very important, and I'm sure in the next 10 years, the products of these schools will be shining.
So we look forward to an era of high quality education in an equitable, inclusive and joyful school environment which creates holistic and well-rounded individuals equipped with key 21st century skills. Thank you so much for this detailed analysis and throwing light on various aspects of this new PM-SHRI initiative. Thank you, Dr. Rajput.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on PM-SHRI Yojana and new education policy. The participants were Dr. J.S. Rajput, former Director NCERT, and Sonu Sood, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.